Hello, and welcome to round 4 of Battle of the Decades, the show where I, Chuchu of Chuchu as a Ranker, recap my Album of the Year series, correct any glaring mistakes I made via my Album of the Year choices, and also indulge in a totally nonsense yet hopefully fun tournament to find out what was the best decade in music. And on this episode we're going to be throwing all the threes into the ring: 1963, 1973, 1983, 1993, 2003 and 2013. So, let's take a look at our Albums of the Year roster. From 1963 we have The Black Saint and the Sinner Lady by Charles Mingus. From 1973 we have Selling England by The Pound by Genesis. From 1983 we have Porcupine by Echo and the Bunnymen. From 1993 we have August and Everything After by Counting Crows. From 2003 we have Dear Catastrophe Waitress by Belle and Sebastian. And from 2013 we have Reflektor by Arcade Fire. And as for corrections, well, there aren't any. I'm fully satisfied with these selections. So, now our battlefield has been prepared, let's be complete rankers and rank into the very fabric of time itself. This is Battle of the Decades, round 4. Coming in last place and netting the 1960s 1 point, we have The Black Saint and the Sinner Lady by Charles Mingus from 1963. Now, as this series is quickly proving, the early 60s are at a distinct disadvantage, as rock and pop from that era was very rudimentary, still finding its feet and looking quite wobbly. Jazz, on the other hand, was fully formed and in its prime. It was so far in advance of rock and pop that it seems almost unfair. Save for the fact that I don't really like jazz all that much. I don't hate it, in fact I'm quite familiar with it, as my father loved jazz and it soundtracked a million car rides, dinner times and back garden barbecues. But still, for me, the very best jazz albums would still probably likely lose to a solidly decent rock or pop album. That's just how my personal preference leans. That said, this particular Charles Mingus LP is fantastic and is almost certainly my favourite jazz record of all time. This album has a cohesive quality that is beyond most other jazz works. It feels almost like a concept piece, with repeated musical phrases turning up in each of the tracks, which ties everything together in a very artistically satisfying kind of way. Plus it's dark and avant-garde. This isn't the type of jazz LP you put on in the background to relax. This is a really dynamic and fraught listen that commands attention. Certain parts of track B, duet solo dances, and the climax of mode D, trio and group dances, feel like entering the gates of hell, their sinister soundscapes dredging out pungent horror vibes. And of course, it almost goes without saying, but the musicianship is superb across the board and throws in some genuine surprises, like the beautiful flamenco guitar trills that lurk within track C group dances. But yeah, I'm not going to go into much more detail than that, because otherwise we'll end up talking about how Charlie Mariano's alt sax and Quentin Jackson's trombone collide at just a specific point between G minor and A 7th diminished, to create a transcendent divergence from the standard octaves. Great, groovy, nice. But still, this is a truly excellent jazz LP that was genuinely better than anything that rock or pop offered in 1963, and yes, that includes the Beatles' debut album. Now, I'm sure that jazz aficionados will hunt me down and stab me to death like a beatnik version of the Ides of March for not rating this a full 5 stars, but as I already said, I'm not obsessed with or even particularly partial to jazz. I don't think any jazz album would be able to squeeze a full 5 stars out of me. That would be like getting blood from a stone. But The Black Saint and the Sinner Lady is still absolutely awesome. 4.5 stars. So, coming in next and netting the 2010s 2 points, we have Reflektor by Arcade Fire from 2013, which is the Canadian art rocker's 4th LP. And this album was the one that kind of beached the band's prestige. Until this point, Arcade Fire had been riding a steady wave of momentum and critical acclaim, with their previous LP The Suburbs gaining a lot of plaudits and Album of the Year nominations. But when this album Reflektor was released, it brought with it a bit of a backlash, with both fans and critics recoiling from its silvery synth-driven foils. Since then, the record has attained a black sheep of the family type of reputation within the band's discography. But, to quote Tyrion Lannister, I have a soft spot in my heart for bastards, cripples and broken things. I personally find Reflektor to be a highly entertaining, atmospheric, cohesive and emotionally salient LP stuffed full of slow burn songs that blossom into awesomeness with just a little patience. To that end, I would agree with the critics that this album lacks the immediacy of the band's previous work. There aren't many songs that immediately leap out at you like Wake Up, Keep the Car Running or Tunnels. But the record does very successfully play the long game, sucking you in for a consistent ride over a double album that clocks in at 1 hour and 15 minutes in length. One of the most complimentary things I can say about this album is that it doesn't feel that long. In fact, this LP breezes by with such ease that you'd swear it was a standard 40-minute type of affair. High spots on a record with no weak spots, other than that couple of minutes of useless ambient noise that annoyingly closes out the record, includes the opening title track Reflektor, which is fantastic with its gradual build-up from synthy minimalism to dancey banger. Here Comes the Nighttime is great with its pulsing cracked synth waves and gently anthemic refrain. You Already Know is an instantly catchy jangle bop tune with some notably Smiths-esque guitar work that sticks pleasurably in the memory. Awful Sound or Eurydice has these glacial walls of synth rising out of its swelling sense of despair. It's pretty rad. While It's Never Over, Hey Orpheus blossoms during its beautifully quiet and reflective moments, as Win Butler potently sighs, "It seems like a big deal now, but you will get over it." So yeah, I could reel off more high spots such as the chunky bass groove of We Exist, or the catchy synth pop of Porno and Afterlife, but that's not really the point. Reflektor is all about its overall atmosphere, which slowly builds and builds and builds into a spectacular whole. To be honest, I often flip-flop between 4.5 and 5 stars for this record, depending on my mood, but today, I'm really feeling it. 5 stars. Coming in next and netting the 1993 points, we have August and Everything After from 1993, which was the debut LP by the American soft rock band Counting Crows. And what we have here is an iconic album of autumnal-hued jangle pop tunes that are quite clearly indebted to R.E.M. But Counting Crows managed to step out of the shadow of that band by way of their singer Adam Duritz, who gives a real show-stopping performance here. His small-town America lyrics thrum with a fragile sense of love and sadness. Plus they have an excellent sense of place. You can almost see those perfect blue buildings or that green apple sea. You can almost smell the wet leaves and feel the raindrops. His lyrics conjure up a tangible feeling of being there, like right next to the dude, soaking up his feelings of both nostalgia and loneliness. Plus his voice itself is smooth enough to make a Wolverine purr. Highlights from an LP that is pretty much all killer no filler includes the likes of Round Here and Mr. Jones, which are straight in there with that jangly R.E.M. sound and appealingly catchy choruses. Perfect Blue Buildings is gorgeous with its low folky atmosphere, rich organs and gently miserable lyrics. Well, I got bones beneath my skin, and mister, there's a skeleton in every man's house. Beneath the dust and the love and the sweat that hangs on everybody, there's a dead man trying to get out. And It Begins is so unbelievably catchy, with Duritz wrapping you around his finger with every emotionally charged syllable that drools from his mouth. Time and Time Again has an explosively catchy chorus and the usual helping of elevated lyrics to enjoy. I wanted the ocean to cover me. I want to sink slowly without getting wet. Maybe someday I won't be so lonely, and I'll walk on water every chance I get. While Sullivan Street and Raining in Baltimore have a lovely sense of nostalgia and location, billowing around their languorously beautiful piano ballads. So yeah, August and Everything After is an emotional tour de force, and one of the very best jangle pop and soft rock records of the 1990s. It's simply unforgettable. 5 stars.
Looking at me, staring in the spotlight.
Next up, and netting the 2004 points, we have Dear Catastrophe Waitress by Belle and Sebastian from 2003, which was the band's 6th LP and the first for Rough Trade, which represented a big step up from the threadbare indie label Jeepster. And with the more muscular label came a more muscular sound, with the band displaying a more rocking and direct side of themselves, thus leading to more commercial success and mainstream recognition. And the album itself is absolutely wonderful, with the band firing on all cylinders and offering up a perfect jangle pop LP stuffed to the brim with unforgettably catchy and lyrically astute tunes that saw the band at their pop-orientated zenith. Opener Step Into My Office Baby sees the band experimenting with new ideas. The track is basically the band's Bohemian Rhapsody, with its multi-parted structure achieving a suitably jangly epicness. Piazza New York Catcher is a lovely acoustic folk number that draws you in with its juxtaposition between the simplicity of the composition and the wordy complexity of Stuart Murdoch's lyrics. I'm a Cuckoo is awesome with its upbeat guitar pop subverted by a moving lyric that has a gut punch final stanza. I loved you, you know I loved you, it's all over now. But I was there when you were lonely, I was there when you were bad, I was there when you were sad. Now it's my time of need, I'm thinking, do I have to plead to get you by my side? Wrapped Up in Books has a nice direct catchiness to its driving bass-led jangle pop. Lord Anthony is a gorgeous string-tinged track with a truly lovely lyric about the vagaries of being bullied at school. While album highlight, If You Find Yourself Caught in Love, is one of my absolute favourite Belle and Sebastian songs. The track has a giddy energy, an epic thrust and awesome lyrics that manage to avoid the usual pitfalls of Christian messaging while still being pretty explicit about it. Plus, I absolutely adore the lyric. If you're going off to war, then I wish you well. But don't be sore if I cheer the other team, because killing people is not my scene. I prefer to give the inhabitants a say before you blow their town away. I like to watch them play. I like to marvel at the random beauty of a simple village girl. Why should she be the one who's killed? Mwah! Chef's kiss. Pay attention, all you warmongering assholes. So yeah, I could reel off more great tracks such as the wiry rocking closer, Stay Loose, or the delicate tweeness of Asleep on a Sunbeam, but I'll stop there and just say that Dear Catastrophe Waitress is Belle and Sebastian at their peak. It's an absolutely wonderful pop record. 5 stars. Coming in next and netting the 1980s 5 points, we have Porcupine by Echo and the Bunnymen from 1983, which was the post-punk icon's third LP. And the recording of this particular album was fraught with infighting and substance abuse. The band was in quite a bad place, and it's a minor miracle that they managed to come out the other side of the session still intact. But despite the turmoil behind the scenes, Echo and the Bunnymen were in ascendancy during this period, and Porcupine represents their commercial peak, providing the band with their first top 10 single via The Cutter, and also their highest UK album chart success with the LP hitting number 2. And this was quite ironic because Porcupine catches the Bunnymen in their least commercial mindset, putting forth a challenging record full of darkness and really weird obtuse soundscapes. It's definitely not the band's most accessible release. That said, it's easily one of their best, if not the best. I tend to go back and forth between Porcupine and Ocean Rain for Echo and the Bunnymen's ultimate masterpiece. It's like one of those eternal conundrums for me personally, it simply depends on what kind of mood I'm in. But highlights on a symphonic LP where you really can hear something new every time you listen includes the opening top 10 single The Cutter, which is phenomenal with its grooving rhythms, colourful synth lines and awesome anthemic liftoff. The Back of Love rules, its rolling drums and bass line underpinning a badass stuttergun guitar performance for the ages. Clay is so fucking rad with its gnarled discordant squall that gives the track an irresistibly dark energy, while still being catchy as all hell. Title track Porcupine shows off the album's experimental leanings, with the track memorably changing tact halfway through from a brooding hellscape to a faster paced distant rocker. Heads Will Roll abuses your balls with its thumping pace, wicked eastern riffage and mosh-ready rocking chorus. It is awesome. While Gods Will Be Gods is a symphonic delight, with its walls of instrumentation coming at you with an impressive layered grandiosity. The track sounds absolutely gargantuan. So yeah, add in the alluring marimba twinkle of My White Devil, the funky bass forward jive of Ripeness, and the super memorable feedback riffs of Closer in Bluer Skies, and you have a magnificent LP of gothic experimentation that stands as one of the most perpetually underrated records of the 1980s. I absolutely love this record, it is amazing. 5 stars. So, coming in first place and netting the 1970s a full 6 points, we have Selling England by the Pound by Genesis from 1973, which was the band's fifth and, in my opinion, best LP. And what we have here is, quite simply, the greatest album of pastoral prog ever recorded. Its wispy acoustics and medieval sounding keys conjuring up images of deep green forests, pristine rivers and stone-walled castles. It's one of the most distinctly English sounding soundscapes ever put to tape, and I absolutely love it. Of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the level of musicianship on display here, which is just out of this world. Each member of the band really brings their A-game to the table, but the standout of the bunch is keyboardist Tony Banks, who just goes God mode on this record, putting in the greatest rock keyboardist performance of all time. His playing is utterly stunning across this LP, dropping your jaw at every available opportunity. His amazing classical piano work on Firth the Fifth is too beautiful for words, and when it finally breaks into electric keyboard riffage, the track goes absolutely stratospheric. And that's without mentioning Steve Hackett's gorgeous guitar solo, which is wonderfully atmospheric. Hackett also shines on the rocking opener Dancing with the Moonlit Night, which is an epic, smoke-belching rock pig, its sweeping cinematic scope feeling ridiculously grandiose. And speaking of cinematic scope, Cinema Show steals the show with its beautiful autumnal acoustics dovetailing into the greatest keyboard solo ever put to tape. Hell, it's my personal favourite solo ever played on any instrument. To say that it's spectacularly badass would be a gross understatement. Props also go out to Phil Collins and Mike Rutherford on the track too. Their taut rhythm section adds just so much energy to the song. Peter Gabriel, meanwhile, is also on fire, adding lots of fun lyrics and theatrical quirks to dig into. No more is this readily apparent than on the 10-minute Cockney epic, The Battle of Epping Forest, during which Gabriel weaves a highly amusing tale of colourful London gangsters fighting to the death via a crazy melee. So yeah, I could reel off the other tracks as high spots too. From the catchy sing-along choruses of I Know What I Like in Your Wardrobe, to the beautiful Soroy instrumental After the Ordeal, to the Collins-fronted acoustic folk of More Fool Me, there isn't a dull moment on the entire record. Selling England by the Pound is a majestic masterpiece and a first ballot top 5 record of all time for me personally. 5 stars. So, stop trying to flog the local crackheads, baggies of baking soda and turn your attention to the scoreboard. Still maintaining its lead is the 1990s with 19 points. Creeping up behind them in second is the 1970s with 18 points. The 1980s are now in third with 14 points. The 2010s slipped down to fourth with 13 points. The 2000s are in fifth with 12 points. And still languishing in last is the 1960s with a paltry 8 points. And that's the fourth round of Battle of the Decades in the bag. Of course, I know you'd rank these records differently, so why not sound off in the comments and tell me how you'd rank them. Of course, I fully invite you to make your own version of this tournament with your own personal albums of the year and post that in the comments too. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe and all that other kind of YouTube jazz. Make sure to take care of yourself, but most importantly, just keep on ranking.